Well, hello.
Hey, Michelle.
So we're back, Mickey and Michelle's performance playbook here. Just so that you know, if you listened to us last time, Mickey and I just spent probably 45 minutes talking, and we got all of the politics stuff off of our chest. And so we're going to do everything we can, not everything we can. We're going to do our best to not bring that up today. And instead, we have a topic that we think that is going to be quite interesting for a lot of you, and that is about how to improve your running. So,
Yes.
Mickey, I'll let you go ahead and start. How do we improve our running?
Okay. Well, I've got about 10 topics here, and I know you've got quite a few. We may have to like split this up. We might have to revisit this. We'll go through once, and then we might have to, do a debunking the run myths episode 2. So a lot of times, a little bit of backstory, right? A lot of times when I get a new run athlete, run specific, they're wanting to improve their run only athlete, and or it could be a triathlete that has struggled to execute their run in a triathlon, mostly 70.3 and Ironman. What I probably focus on here is more pure running as opposed to those athletes that are struggling to run off the bike, because there's other complications, and I'm sure you would agree, right? Like either overbiking, nutrition is like the number one thing. Like you will tank your run if you don't fuel yourself, especially for Ironman. So we'll phrase a lot of this around like run more, the run focus. Like if you're going to do an open marathon or a half, although it does apply to triathletes too that are wanting to improve your run, your standalone run or running off the bike, assuming you've got your nutrition solved. But a lot of
Maybe
times
like
athletes,
our part two will be
yes,
like running, like triathlon running will be next time. So this will
right,
be more
right.
about
Well,
open running. Next time will be triathlon running.
right. Yeah, I think that's probably a good way to break it up because yeah, we could spend probably hours on that alone. But for example, a lot of athletes, I brought on some new run athletes recently, and I've had this over the years. We have, and most of the time I'm working with not new athletes. They've been running for quite a while, 2 decades, right? A decade or more. Started running in college, maybe even ran in high school, although maybe not. I don't have too many right now that ran in high school, but longtime runners. And I'll just be honest, a lot of athletes now that I'm working with are sort of typically masters, like, and if you use masters as 35 and over, masters athletes, even though maybe they're 40s, 50s, 60s. I have some runners that are in their 70s. But when they come to me, they're like, okay, I want to start improving my run. I'm slowing down. And, this is almost everyone has a time in mind, right? Like I want to run half in 145 or I want to run a half, whatever the number is, right? And I'm totally just making up these numbers. And so, what do we need to do to get them there? And a lot of times what I will take them through is maybe quite different from what they would, what they have done in the past and what they may pull off of like I'm sure all of us probably use Hal Higdon's, right? A marathon build at some point. I mean, I used Hal Higdon when I trained for my first marathon in college. So, you know, yeah, so I guess I'll approach it from, how I will take that runner from, okay, number one, right? Number one thing is take pace off your watch at first, right? Like you have this goal and that's good, right? We all have goals, but let's let it go for a bit, right? Let's see what we can do to build up run volume first. Well, run consistency really first, especially if an athlete's taken a lot of time off, right? That's always number one. Like let go of the expectations and just focus on getting your run consistency up. So my number one suggestion for every athlete is take pace off your watch. You can have heart rate on there and have time over distance at first. That's always my number one. So I'll stop there. That's always my very first ask for an athlete. And sometimes I get a lot of pushback because pace is like so ingrained, right? Like, oh, if we're running this pace, it's bad. If we're running this pace, it's good. And we want to do that every single day. And then I'm sure you've got athletes that are on Strava or, they're looking at their data. I can't run that easy because I might get judged or something. And not all athletes are like that, but all of us, some of us, I will say, probably have a bit of concern, right? Of someone judging us unexpectedly, which is why I actually didn't even get on Strava when I was really competitive. I actually am on Strava now because I really don't give a shit what my paces are. So yeah. So Michelle, like what's your, like when someone give us your, maybe number one thing, how do you start an athlete off when they come to you that, they want to improve their run?
Let's say first I have to comment on the Strava thing. I will tell you this, that when I see an athlete, well, I don't actually go on Strava anymore, but I was on Strava for a while, like during the pandemic. Strava was actually very appropriate and I think good for me. Sort of for a couple of years, it served a good purpose. But I will say that whenever I saw, especially like an Ironman athlete, and they would do like a 4 mile run off the bike at 8:35 pace, and then they would call it easy off the bike.
Yeah,
And
no,
I swear to God, like every time I saw that, I was like, that person doesn't know what easy means, right? Like they're like, and so it's like I know what they're doing. Like they're putting this easy 8:30 pace that it's not physiologically easy. Like you're fooling yourself that that's easy. And the reason that I know that is because your half Ironman run pace is closer to 9 minutes. So like if you're running faster than you could hold for a half marathon, it's not easy. Like that doesn't qualify as that. And even though it might feel like that for 4 miles or whatever, my thought is like they don't understand physiology. Yeah, there were a couple things about, I feel like I want to preface it with this, is that letting go of the timeline, at least at first, is really important too. And so when people come, because usually when people come to hire a coach, it's not like, I don't know, at some point in the next 2 years, I want to run a marathon and crack 3:30, right? Like, so if somebody came to me
yeah,
and said that, I would be like, got it. Oh, we could totally do
amazing.
that. Like, how much time
Yeah,
do you have available to train? And like, if you give me 2 years and
we're
you are going to
there.
be patient, like we can totally do this, right? But usually it's like, oh, this marathon's in 4 months, right? And this is what I want to do. And you're like, oh, well, where are you at now? And like, where, it's like we didn't
Right.
build the base that we needed to build first. And so when I was listening to you say, like, let go of time, like let's build this aerobic engine, first. My first thought is like most athletes don't give us or themselves enough time to build and develop that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I yeah, I'm with you. I think that as we talked before, we started recording, so much of this is so nuanced, and so it depends so much. Like I've had athletes call me and tell me that they want to qualify for Boston, and I'm like, okay, like tell me a little bit about your background. Where are you? How old are you? Like, what's your fastest marathon so far? How much time do you have available to train? And like there was one athlete, she ended up not hiring me. I was like, I'm not sure how, I forget the word I use, but like realistic this is this year, right? So like I'm not telling you you can never qualify for Boston, but given where you're at right now and given where you need to be, the path to get there is likely going to be longer than 6 months. And she thanked me and she said, wow, that you sounds like you're a really honest coach, because other coaches will tell me that I can totally do that and I think they're just trying to get
Yeah,
my business. And I'm like, yeah, probably. I'm like, I'm just trying to be honest. Like I don't want to set you up for failure by promising you something that is, I know is not realistic, is just too big of a leap from where you're at right now. And she kind of acted like, she appreciated my honesty. She didn't hire me. So
I
I
think
was I try to be honest about that kind of thing. Like, here's where you're at, right? And then here's where you need to be. So yeah, consistency and injury free to start is absolutely the key. No matter where you're at, no matter how long you've been running, consistency and injury free is the way. And where we screw that up is when we get greedy and we start doing too much, too fast, too hard, like too frequently, too.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. I had one athlete last year that was looking to do a half, and I don't think he'll mind if I mention this, but he had a time in mind, and so his proposal to me, because he it's a two-way street, and I'm open to proposals, was to basically start nailing his long runs at his desired pace. And I'm like, okay, let's
Let's see
let's
how that
see
goes.
let's see how that. No, and I honestly, I should probably, I know I kept the email that I sent back, like trying to explain, right? Like you might be able to do that once, maybe twice, but as one, we're not at the run volume that you sort of need to be at before you even can start to think about pace at over that volume, over that distance. Two, the huge amount of strain you will the stress of that workout will impart a strain on your body that will wreck you for several days, taking you out of the run consistency, which you really need to build not only your aerobic base, but your lower leg strength and the muscular endurance to be able to handle doing the thing you want to do at that intensity. And he totally open to it. Okay, well, so how, with that in mind, and I'm sure you've had athletes kind of similarly try to, they've got something in mind that a time goal, right? And it is sometimes you can give them some of a workout that will sort of, I like the word that Steve Magnus uses, embarrass them a little bit. It's not that, you are actually, well, you're embarrassing the body, right? You are asking it to do something that you think you might be able to do. And that's great. We do want to challenge ourselves, right? We do want to go and try to see if we're in the ballpark of realistic. And sometimes doing a workout that is a little bit, will embarrass our bodies and will maybe embarrass us, can be super eye-opening and allow us to kind of reevaluate our expectations for that race. So yeah, I don't know where I was going to go with that other than, yes, like you have this goal, that's great. But I think what you just also said, it's like being realistic. And I think a lot of times athletes do want to use that time goal within the long run. In the long run, it's in and of itself when we're building volume already is pretty high, pretty stressful, not only on the aerobic system, but also in your aerobic system, but also in your lower legs. I mean, a lot of injuries from pushing long run too fast and too quickly, so especially for new runners, but it can happen really at any time. I mean, even if you've just taken a little time off of running, can also be an issue with masters athletes. I've had some athletes that have had some bone density issues, stress fractures. And so you've really got to be super careful on how quickly you build that run volume. But yeah, I guess I could go on and on about, intervals and how to test yourself and how to investigate like a potential, realistic time goal. And again, like the longer you have to train, the longer a coach has to train you, the more likely you are going to reach those time goals. But yeah, if you give someone 4 months or, I've got some 12 weeks, like, okay, well, let's see what we can do in 12 weeks. But yeah, I think you had go ahead. I'll let you take over.
In a big picture sense, if we think about what it is we're trying to develop, like we're trying to develop the internal systems, like your aerobic and metabolic energy systems, to be able to convert the energy required to allow your body to like keep those muscle contractions up for however long you're trying to do that for, right? So it could be 3 or 4 hours if you're running a marathon. It could be, 8 to 24 hours if you're running an ultra marathon. It's 20 minutes if you're running a 5K. And so we're looking specifically at that, and that is the thing that probably, would you agree with me that I think that takes the longest to develop?
Yeah,
Right?
I think so.
Aerobic system. And so, but that's just one component. You can have an excellent aerobic system, but then if you don't have the muscular endurance, so typically what's happening is when we're developing the aerobic system, the load on our muscular system is quite light for most of us, right? So I'm not talking about professional athletes at this point. Like the professional athletes have an aerobic system that is so highly developed that they can also be working a muscular system, and their aerobic system is so highly developed, like it's not even being challenged. But for most amateurs, I want to caveat that what it feels like when we're developing that aerobic system, it's so easy that they think I'm not doing anything, because what they're envisioning is that muscularly it wasn't hard, right? Like my legs didn't hurt, or I finished and I didn't feel like I really gained any fitness there. I must be wasting my time going that easy. And so like that's one thing. And what you and I talked about, well, then a great way to develop that, because that it has to be developed, but it doesn't have to be developed running. And in fact, a lot of people don't even have the fitness to, like, as soon as they start running, they're above the level that they want to be at to be developing the system that we want them to be developing. So to do that, via easy cycling is probably the best way. And you and I talked about that before. Personally, so I've been coaching this is my 16th year. My athletes who I guess we'll say it this way. It doesn't have to be done this way. I've seen athletes run good marathons without riding a bike. I've seen more often athletes have really good marathons when they supplement their run training with bike training because it's such an easy way to develop that low aerobic cardiovascular metabolic system that is hard. It, frankly, like the amount of time that it takes to develop that is above and beyond the amount of time that an athlete can likely spend pounding on their legs.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
yeah, go
Cycling
ahead.
is much less stressful on the muscular system, right? I always just say it's a safer way to build a lot of fitness. I think there is a bit more transfer from bike. Well, this has been my experience in coaching, transfer from bike to run than swim to run. But swimming is also fantastic for your aerobic system and your lifetime swimmer. Uh, is there something about, I think, the muscular component of the bike that's maybe more transferable to running? But again, if you're not a cyclist and you have access to a pool, like use that, right? So I think it's not that you have to become a cyclist, but yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if we think about, so if we're back to like the systems that we're trying to
Hmm.
develop, so you have that aerobic metabolic one that supplementing with cross training somehow is likely to be very beneficial because most people frankly just don't like running as slow as they need to be running to develop that system. And that is an ego thing for most people that like they're like if I can run 9 minute pace or 10 minute pace and it doesn't feel that hard, why do I need to slow down to 11 or 12 minute pace? They're like, well, because if you were to actually take measurements in your body about how your body's producing energy, going that slow and easy is like where your body needs to be to maybe developing that system. And ego wise, that's hard for a lot of people to do. But then the second thing is we want to be developing like the like muscular power, muscular endurance, because like running at your 10K or half marathon or even marathon pace is using muscles in a way that you're not using muscles when you're just out running easy. And so it's very possible that muscularly then you get really tired. So it's like at some point, like athletes are not wrong in thinking, because there's this whole thing about like you just have to just run really easy. And then on the
Hmm.
day you'll be able to run fast.
Yeah.
And I like totally disagree with that. I'm like, and listen, I'm like all about the easy stuff as much as you can do as much as you can possibly do. And you have to do something of quality. And it's like, this is where there's so much, I'm going to call it controversy, but confusion, because there's so many different ways to do that,
Hmm.
right? So we can be doing 30-second strides at the end of an easy run on like a flat ground, but we could also do those uphill, or we could also do those downhill and work on turnover, right? So something short like that is possible, but then also we're going to be working intervals that are going longer and longer and longer, understanding that the duration of the interval and the intensity of the interval that you're pushing directly affects the system that you're training. And so
Yeah.
when we start thinking in terms of what am I actually trying to achieve, it's not just go out and do, intervals as fast as you can do them. You're like, do you have any idea what system you're training? Like, what is it? Where's the hole in your fitness? Right. So for somebody who has a lot of top end speed, and I have athletes and runners like this where like you set them out to run strides and they're like 5:45 pace on those strides. Right. And I guarantee you, those are the same athletes that are like, Coach, I want to train more speed. And I'm like, athlete, you don't need any more speed. Like, you've got so much speed. You've got speed in spades. Like, like you're not even running a 5K at 5:45 pace. So like your body is completely capable of going fast like that, but like you can't hold that. So, like the endurance part is where we want to develop that. That doesn't necessarily mean it's all as easy as you can possibly go. It's more like, let's dial in that 8 minute pace and hold it for a long time, right? Like not too fast, not too slow. And then you're developing that like threshold, system where there's muscular development that's happening there
Hmm.
that you don't get. That I felt like I just went around in circles, but
No,
the
that,
idea
yeah.
being that like every system, every interval duration and every interval intensity has its purpose. And then it's a matter of individually for the athlete, what are your goals? What are your current strengths? What are you currently already pretty good at? And where are the holes? What do you need to develop in order for you to reach your goal. And then that's where a coach comes in. Like if you're confused about that, an experienced coach will be able to look at like even as simple as like your different run times. Like you look at here's your 5K run time, here's your 10K, your half marathon, and your marathon. And there's a pretty set, we'll call it like a differential of like if you can run a 5K at this time, then in theory you should be able to run a marathon at this time, only if you're trained appropriately to do so. So if there's a giant discrepancy there and your 5K is relatively fast for your marathon, you're going to have to develop, like your focus will be lots of endurance to develop the ability to hold for the marathon. However, if your 5K is not that fast and you want to improve your marathon, that might be a case where it's like, well, going down and working on developing and raising that top end to get your 5K up so it's faster, then you're like, oh, well, that, the rising tide lifts all boats, and then your endurance pace can go up, and then you'll find yourself running faster at the half and full marathons.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. I think having that guidance that can look objectively, right, at your different races and your, paces and heart rates and efforts, and to help you develop like, okay, what do you need to focus on, right? If you're if you're shooting for 3:15 marathon, but your 5K, is, I don't know, 30 minutes. Well, there's a big discrepancy there, right? You need to probably work on your 5K maybe, or readjust your marathon expectations. Yeah. I think one of the things around that, what you're kind of specificity, right? Like you're talking about like, what are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? And then what do you want to do? And, trying to be objective about that. What I've found also, especially in our culture, probably always been around there, right? But you kind of got it. It's like no pain, no gain, right? So if the workout wasn't hard, then I wasn't doing anything, which is wrong because again, you got to think about the systems that you're training and what the focus is on the day. But what I also have seen is a lot of athletes, one, thinking they're going easy when they're actually, this is my experience with a lot of what I see when someone's new. This is an easy run for me. And almost like across the board, it's zone 3. It's tempo. Like that's from a heart rate perspective, from their pace perspective, however you break it down, it's actually tempo. And that's what they do all the time. You ask them to go harder. They can't go too much harder for that much longer. Go easier is it's just boring. And I can't, it hurts my, I can't run that slow. My form, and then I'm like, okay, use a run walk. There's athletes out there, triathletes I know specifically that are using run walks for their easy runs, and they can run a 3:15 off the bike. So if they can do it, why can't we not do a run walk to train the system, and keep our run form good?
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Genuine question for you, because I feel like I feel like I could make an argument either way on this point, although I tend to lean in one direction the more I think about it. But okay, so hypothetically, you have an athlete and you've determined that the top of their zone 2, or like this metabolic zone, we're trying to train heart rate 135, right? So you're going to go out and you're going to try to run with your heart rate under 135. And they're like, coach, I can't do that. Like I can only run for, by 3 minutes into my running, my heart rate's at 140. So what do I do? Like, do you have them slog slower to keep the heart rate low? Or do you have them jog as easy as they can, and then when it hits 135, walk until it comes down to 125 and then repeat? Like, what's your preference there? And I'm genuinely curious because, I see both sides, but I have a preference.
Yeah. It depends on the athlete, and it depends on, because as you know, math, or using, whether you call it math or you want to just zone training, your metabolic, your crossover point, whatever it is, your fat burning zone, it's not for everybody. And I think again, it depends on the athlete, right? But using a range. So one, I always use a range. I don't actually cut it off at 135. I usually am like 5 over. I guess I have for some athletes that really want to focus on building up their fitness under their metabolic crossover and their math. So yes, I have used a cap for those athletes when I know they are game and they will do what it takes because they see the progress. Usually they hit that top end cap, and then they'll walk to bring it down to about 5 to 7 under, and then they start running again. I think that for most people that tends to work better because I think it does allow them to run a little bit more like in their natural form, as long as they are okay with that run. But that took years to get this. I'm thinking of one athlete in particular and she's seen big progress in her math numbers and her runs off the bike and Ironman. And I mean, she's made a lot of progress. So she's a believer, but it took a long time to be like, you can do this, you can do a run walk and you can still get faster. And she's seen it, 2 minutes off her MAF times by doing this protocol, and not for that long. If you're dedicated, you can bring it down, 3-4 months. Like it's a real thing. So in that case, I usually prefer a run walk. For me, I can just slog. I can just jog so tight. Like I think it's an art form to be able to run really slow and I can run really. I had decent speed too. So for myself, I will just try my hardest to keep a run form. When I go, I give myself a bit of an over cap now because I live in very hilly terrain. So I let maybe 5 over, depending on the day, maybe 10, right? I'm not very dedicated at the moment, but I like to play the game. How can I keep my run form very efficient for me and try to keep it under that cap? So I don't know. What's your preference? I'm curious.
I just think it's interesting that because my answer is literally like exactly the same. I might have like framed it differently,
Yeah.
but I like the big picture concept there is exactly the same. Because I don't know if it was Lawrence or if it was another coach say that like if you're incapable of running slow, and I'm sure you've gotten this argument
Oh yeah.
before, like
Yeah.
we all have, right? So like our athletes who are not elite athletes and they go out and they try to run slow enough to keep their heart rate down, and they're like, it just feels horrible. Like the run it feels in a way that they don't like the way it feels. And so definitely for them, I'm like, go ahead and do a run walk routine. Like you're better off having more of a normal, natural run stride and then walking when you hit your cap. And then hopefully what we're seeing over time is that you can run longer before you reach the cap and the need to walk or whatever. And I've seen that work really well for athletes who have done that walk run routine. I do a lot of run walking here, but like where I live, it's all hills. Like I
Yeah.
don't have
Same.
like the longest stretch of road I have in my entire town that is flat is 3/10 of a mile, right? Like beyond
Probably
that.
about
So
mine.
it's
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
it's all up and
Yeah.
down. So I modify my training accordingly. But I've heard other coaches say, and now that I understand run form and mechanics and efficiency so much better, I get this. And it's like if you're incapable of running slow, you have work to do on your run form and efficiency because it should be absolutely possible to run 3 minutes per mile slower than you're capable of running. Like 3 minutes per mile. We should be able to do that and keep the same form. And what changes is probably your cadence is going to slow down some, but mostly your stride length. But you should still be able to hold, like a a reasonable posture and like the rotation stays the same. And what changes is that you're just sort of shuffling with short little steps. And people who, and this is, I don't want to make a blanket statement and say this is it across the board, but I will say this. And even as I say this, I'm going to say that the third piece of, when I'm looking at what are the qualities that we're trying to develop in order to help an athlete get faster, we talked about the aerobic metabolic system, we talk about muscular endurance, and the third piece is going to be like efficiency or economy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
How easy can you make it to run faster? And it's such a key piece that I think a lot of people miss out on, a lot because there's a lot of misinformation out there that like you just run enough and your body will find its own best
Yeah.
form. And that is just absolute complete bullshit. And the reason that is bullshit is because most of us live lives that put us in this crappy posture that
Sitting.
like,
Yeah.
yeah. And I will say biking and running. So like, and if I just go back, there's so much here I could say. Like, let me just go back and be like, historically, I personally had just horrific run form. I suspect that a lot of that came from growing up as a swimmer. And you see it so commonly that people who are swimmers and bikers, then they get to the run and it just looks really ugly, like
It
what they're
does.
doing. You're
Yeah.
like, it looks really hard. It doesn't look efficient. It is hard. It's not efficient. Like the way it looks is it's true. Like what we're doing isn't easy. So like they have the aerobic engine, they have the muscular endurance. I had all that. I was working so hard to go quite slowly and then spent years trying to figure out how do I make this easier for myself? Like that's the doorway that needed to be unlocked for me personally and for probably 90% of amateur athletes. Like, I don't think I'm exaggerating when I say 90% of amateur athletes could improve their economy and efficiency and therefore run faster at the same effort and be
Absolutely.
able
Yeah.
to therefore hold it longer. And so clue, and so I'm circling all this back to our running easy discussion that we were having, that if you're not capable of jogging really easy and it feels
Mm-hmm.
absolutely horrible, that is like a flashing red sign that your run form and efficiency and economy could really improve. Because you look at, like, what even the Kenyans, so for them, like 8-minute pace is crazy easy, but they're also capable of running a 4-minute pace and holding it for
Right.
marathons,
Yeah.
right? So their form doesn't really change, but yet it
Yeah.
still looks really easy. And it's like,
Yeah.
because you have, and where I would argue where you go with this, and this is like from just what I've learned in the past couple of years, is it's not about cues. You can't just cue yourself or cue somebody into having better run form. It's literally like fascial chains. It's like the way that your fascia is formed, where it's tight, where you're locked, where you're held, what your posture is doing, that will physically prevent you from making the shape of running. And so it's like, in order to fix this economy efficiency thing, much of that work is done outside of running. Like, that's the work
Absolutely.
that's done like on your living room floor, where like you're learning how to round an arch and you're learning how to improve your posture. Like, that's where the flow rope that came in and made a giant difference for me. I saw somebody post today something about doing hula hoop before they were running, and I'm like, you know what, I like, now that I've been flow roping and I
Yeah.
understand like hip function, I'm like, I can see how hula hoop, like, if you're not capable of hula hoop, your hips are locked,
Locked. Yeah.
right? And like,
Yeah.
there's a sign there. So it's like, these little things can show you that if you improve that and you improve the way you move, then you'll be able to go out and actually jog easy. And this was just like such a long diversion.
No, it's totally
I
relevant. Totally
interrupted you to be
relevant.
like, well, how do we run easy? Do we do a run walk, or do we just jog, and slog the whole time? If it feels like terrible, horrible slogging, go back and work on your economy and efficiency. That was like the too long didn't read
Yeah.
answer to that question.
Well, no, I think it was really relevant because let's be real, I think a lot of athletes, especially as we get older, right? If we take time off, we are losing fitness pretty quickly. Now, depending on our diets and stress levels, and I mean, there's a whole host of things that can be happening to damage or protect our metabolic systems, right? Which plays into a metabolic efficiency, which plays into how your body is processing fats and carbs and whatever. And we can, that's a whole nother topic, but whatever it is, like, it might feel, I mean, I have a lot of examples of athletes taking time off, coming back and really struggling because they've lost a lot and they're used to feeling a certain way, but their heart rate's just through the roof. And so do you run walk or do you run really easy? I will just say, as a coach, like, I never felt comfortable because I'm not trained in run form. And I've also had some athletes that did run form analyses and run form help, and I don't really think it helped them. And I think it gets back to what you've worked on, you've done with your courses, your flow up courses, and what Lawrence talks about. It's not always about the cueing and a perfect, like an idealized run form. It's a being able to run efficiently in your body. And you can probably improve it, like you're saying, with, looking at fascia and looking at mobility and
Thing. It's like,
yeah,
improve your body
body, right.
outside of running, and
Right.
then it just shows up
It
magically
translate.
when
Yeah.
you're running. So you can't just
Right.
like cue yourself into running better when
Right.
your fascia is locked down and
Right.
physically
Right.
preventing you from doing the thing.
Right. And since I didn't have, I kind of found Lawrence maybe 3 years ago, 3 or 4. I don't know. It's been a little while, but for me, I never wanted to like, when people told me that they couldn't run that slow, I did have the thought like, well, actually, I think you can. It's actually just ego. But I'm not going to delve down. I'm not going to, and it might be that the run form actually is limiting them because they've got some immobility issues. But I was never comfortable saying like, we got to work on that. I felt more knowing that you can still get fitness built if you do a run walk. I was more comfortable prescribing that and allowing people to run what they felt was natural versus like forcing them to run in some unnatural form. Now that I know about your courses and, I've been following Lauren's for a while, I'm more willing to be like, hey, you're struggling here. I think you should go join this or go take Michelle's course or, work on some things to help you. I've already recommended it to all my athletes really. So yeah, I think that's a big learning for me as a coach was to feel more comfortable saying like, we need to slow it down. And we need to go harder when the time is right to go harder. So yeah.
Let me just share with you this. So I was out running this morning. Currently, I'm running like probably 4 times a week. Maybe every once in a while I'll get like a fifth run in a week. And I feel like this overall, but I love, again, everything is nuanced. It's like take it with a grain of salt. I've been running for 3 decades. So like I can get away with 2 run workouts per week and not injure myself, right? Like if I'm working hard twice a week running, I can do that and not injure myself because I have 30 years of pounding on tendons in my body. So this is not something I would be like, oh, you're a brand new runner. You just came from swimming. You just follow my,
Right. Yeah.
So you take that with a grain of salt. But anyway, I was out this morning and I was doing a bit of an interval run, but I hadn't run. I guess this is my point. Because I came from a swimming background where I was, short and tight, I feel like the main thing is this: it's short and tight in the front. When your fascia along like the frontal chains is short and tight and restricting you from like opening yourself up this way, what happens is you get caught behind your hips when you're running. And when your hips then, and some people will say, like Bobby McGee says, it looks like your butt is in a bucket,
Yep.
right? Where you're
Yep.
sitting
Yep.
kind of when you're
Yep.
running. And I totally used to do that. And from that position, it's really hard to then propel yourself forward because your hips are locked in they're stuck back. And when that's happening, the only way to get your foot forward is to kick it forward. So now you're like
Mm-hmm.
kicking a
Yep.
soccer ball forward, right? And that like forward momentum is actually what causes when you see the photographs of people running, and I was one of these, so I'm allowed to talk about this, where your foot is way out in front of you, your toe is up, you're landing on your heel, and it's where heel striking gets a bad rap. Where heel striking in and of itself is not a problem. It's the fact that your center of mass is so far off, that your foot is so far out in front of you, and it's like putting the brakes on. So you're running while putting on the brakes on, and there's not a way to get around that until you fix the hip. Like the hips need to come forward, but for the hips to come forward, you see immediately what happened. My
Yeah. You
chest
got to
also
open up.
comes forward, right? Which means that my head has to be stacked on top of my shoulders so that my chest can come forward, so that my hips can come forward. And when that happens, I'm able to get a stride where I'm pushing off of my back leg. And you'll hear people say this all the time. You're like driving the world away from you with each
Mm-hmm.
step. So like I'm stepping and I'm pushing the world back. And when you can achieve that, it's like the forward momentum you get, like you're in better balance, your cadence improves, everything feels easier. The rotation piece then is able to happen. So I felt, so today when I was running, I was battling myself some. And the thought occurred to me like, yep, you have 40 years of ingrained patterning of kicking the soccer ball and sitting in a bucket when you run, right? 40 years I did that. And maybe for 30 because I guess I wasn't really running when I was 15. You know what I mean? But I have enough experience now of like when my body is really open of what it feels like to run with good economy, with good efficiency. It's not as good as like a professional runner would be, but for me, it's like relatively good. And so when I'm doing it like my old way, I can really feel it now in a way that I would say like I didn't before. Like people would tell me you have crappy run form, and I'm like, well, thanks for that. I have no idea what I'm supposed to do about it, right? Like I'm like,
Right.
I don't
Yeah.
know.
That's helpful.
I just
Not.
it's like I just need to run more, just run harder, run uphill, like I don't know. And now I have a really clear understanding. And when I look back, I'm like, okay, you know what I did? I rode my bike it was a beautiful weekend here. And I rode my bike 3-ish hours both days, Saturday and Sunday. right? And then yesterday, I took my daughter to get her driver's license in the morning, which is a very exciting
Very
thing. But we had,
exciting.
spent the whole morning at the DMV, and I came back and I went swimming. Basically, so for 3 days, I didn't run, I didn't flow rope, I didn't do mobility routines. I scrolled the news and I did, you know what I mean? I sat a lot. You know what I mean? And like, so I lived like, I will call like a normal American in not doing all of these things that I typically would do. And all of these, so I wouldn't blame it on one particular thing, but it was like all these things that kind of added up that put me back into my sort of like closed in the
Closed
front
off. Yeah.
posture. And then when I go out running, I'm feeling my foot kick forward. And I know this is like, nope, that's not right. And to try to fix it like mid run was sort of hard for me to do today. And it was just a really good reminder that, like, yeah, I need to go back and be doing, all the things that I know to be doing that open my body up, relax my breathing, get my posture stacked, open up those fascial chains, let go of tension, and once, it's so hard to explain because it's like if you haven't experienced that and experienced the difference, you're like, what is she even talking about? And the second you experience it for yourself, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And I've had athletes tell me, because I used to preach a lot like, let go of tension, let go of tension, let it feel easy and relaxed. And athletes will tell me, like, I'm not holding tension, Michelle. I'm not holding tension. I'm like, you are, you just don't know what it's like to let it go, and you don't, and feel the difference. Like, so the amount of tension you're holding on to is so long term and it's so ingrained that it just feels normal to you. And it is normal at this point. And then when you learn to let it go, and what that feels like when you've let it go, then when it creeps back in, which it does every day, right? You know what I mean? So when, even with like the flow running stuff that I teach, it's so like not a one and done thing. It's not like, oh, just learn this one concept or do this exercise a couple times or like learn how to do the flow rope patterns and then never do them again. And like you're off on your path. It's like the way that life comes in at us and the way that we sit and the way we get stressed out and the way that we just live, it creeps back in. And so it is like Lawrence will say, it's like brushing your teeth. Like taking care of your fascia is a daily process to like keep yourself open, keep yourself relaxed. And I've had athletes who have grasped what I'm saying and they start doing all the things that I'm asking them to do. And the notes I get back from them will be like, this would be like an easy run with strides. I felt so amazing on those strides. I felt open. I was free. I was flying. It was effortless and it was so fast. It just felt amazing. And they're like, now I know what you were saying when you're like, let go of tension because I felt it. And then that same athlete will come back, 3 days later and be like, I had the worst day at work and my boss is such a jerk and and I could just feel how tensed up I was. And I was just running in this tense up state. I'm like, perfect. You can feel the difference now. And as long as you are aware of that, you can feel it. And then you have the tools and techniques in place that because the thing is, once you know how to do it, you can let go of tension in 5 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
5 minutes of rounding and arching, slow breathing, and flow roping. Boom. You like, as long as you've achieved it first, right? Then it's like it's kind of like you don't need to go to the dentist every morning to have your teeth fully cleaned, right? So like if you can go through and do like a full body like relaxation, like learning what it feels like to let go of tensions, find that state somehow, anyhow, hula hoop, whatever you need to do. And then it's just a matter of 5 minutes at a time is enough to like keep you tuned up.
Mm-hmm.
If you feel it that way. I just found it interesting this morning when I felt myself kicking my feet forward, and I haven't felt that in a while. And I was like, well, duh, what did you do the last 3 days? Like you
Yeah.
rode your bike, you swam, and you didn't do mobility, you didn't flow the rope, and you watched the news. So there
It's,
you go.
it's, you're being very, that's wise. It's wisdom and mindfulness. And yeah, I think being able to identify the differences is, you know, yeah, really, really key and interesting. I haven't run in quite a while. I have not run, oh man, probably in a few months. That's bad. I know. It's not bad. It is what it is. I hike a ton and I'm snowshoeing right now. So where I live, yeah, one, very hilly, two, roads not great. And my dog, who, it's interesting, since I've moved in the last couple of years, I basically only run with my dogs. Like there's like Less than, I would say, 5% of my runs I do on my own. Occasionally I will drive down to a flatter road and I'll run, but it's not as fun. And I really love running with my dogs. And my dog that I was running with, he kind of, every time we do more than about 4 miles, he'd start to limp. And I think he strained a toe. It's not broken, right? Like it's not that painful, but it's something about the run motion, the consistent. So when we're out hiking and he's off leash, he can just go and he can stop and he can, whatever. And it doesn't happen as often. So anyways, that's a lame excuse to say why I'm not running. My dog can't run, so I'm not running either. I could go run on the treadmill, but that's boring. So
Yeah.
anyways, I digress, but, it's going to be an awakening when I get back to it. I will get back to it. And maybe this is for those of you out there that may not be running or may not be doing the thing that you used to do. And, it's always there. It's not like I said it was bad. It's not bad. It is what it is. As long as you're moving and, I could, my snowshoe data, right, that I do put up on Strava, I think my heart rate hit, 170 the other day. So like it is not easy. And I get a great workout, I'm out there a couple hours with my dogs and they love it. So but when I return, I will be very mindful of no expectations, right? There's aspirations about what you want to do, no expectations, and some of the hills here you have to power hike it. I mean, when I'm running consistently here, I can slow jog some of them, but then they're really rocky, and it's like turn the ankle, break an ankle. So some of it's just better to power hike. Even when I'm power hiking up, my heart rate's still, probably 20 over MAF. It's still fitness, but
Yeah.
yeah.
I took some time off running and I didn't run for a while, a couple months anyway. And when I came back, so I feel like this actually might be a really interesting discussion just for people who are in that situation, right? So like you haven't run for 4 or 5 months, but you have a past, like you have running, in your past. Then when you're starting back up, I'd be curious to hear like how you would do it. How I did it was, I started like in my mind, frequency and consistency come first. So whatever it takes to achieve frequency and consistency, it might be, I mean, I started with 2 miles, like just 20 minutes, 30 minutes. And if you finish feeling like I could definitely go longer and harder,
Hmm.
perfect. Do it again tomorrow and then wait a day and then do it again, do it again. So I was, I think I started off by when I decided, okay, I'm going to try to start running again. I was running like 20 to 30 minutes 4 times a week, right? Almost all easy for probably the first 3 weeks or so. And then in the fourth week, I would add strides, right? And when I say easy, it was, for me, it was run walk, primarily because like the hills around my house are not like running up them. I'm fooling myself when I say I'm going
You're
easy
saying,
if I'm
yeah.
running, and I'm capable of running up them. It's just not easy. So I need to, and I feel like one thing I'm way better at now than I was a decade ago is deciding beforehand what I'm going to do when I go out and then sticking with that and having an understanding of physiology and knowing like what is easy and what is not, and giving myself permission to walk, not telling myself that I'm a loser because I don't have the fitness to like, run in zone one up these hills like when it's humid like it is here and whatever. But yeah, so I would say start with frequency, consistency. If they're short and they're very easy and you finish and feel like you did nothing, that's great. And then it's like once a week, start adding sort of 10 minutes or so to like start making that run longer. So it becomes like, so it's 30 minutes 3 times a week. And then the weekend run becomes up to an hour,
Yeah.
and then maybe an hour 10, an hour 15, hour 20, depending on what your goals are. We're adding like time and distance there, still keeping all that easy. Then adding in like the speed work part, I start always with strides,
Yeah.
and then I'll
That's
go out
same.
and do something, like 12 times 1 minute run on 1 minute walk, 1 minute run on 1 minute walk, something like that. And then I start adding, depending again, so that would be a really good, very basic plan for just about everyone.
Yeah.
And then
Yep.
for the first, say, 2 months. And then where it diverges from there depends a lot on what your goals are, right? Like what are you trying to do? Are you trying to run? And that actually might lead into an interesting conversation if we say, okay, what does a really good marathon build look like?
Hmm. Yeah. I think,
Like, okay, what does that look like? And so, yeah, I
yeah,
have a
yeah.
story
You
that
have an example, right?
I have an example, and I got permission from an athlete that I coach to tell this story. And some of you listening might know Tia. So Tia, this is your part. Tia has been an Ironman athlete in the past, and now she just has a busier life, and her priorities have changed, and she still like has a very deep love of running, and so she's focused on the marathon and wanting to run good marathons. And this is what I'll say. The reason that I want to use Tia as an example here is because Tia is an absolute dream athlete to coach. And there are some things that everyone could learn from the way that Tia manages herself, like through the marathon build, and like in her communication with me, like the way that she and I have figured out like the coach athlete relationship, and the that's what leads to her success, is that she is like, I want to say she's married to her routine, because every once in a while it changes. But when it changes, she puts a note in Training Peaks and she's like, hey, coach, I'm going out of town this weekend, or like it's my girlfriend's birthday this weekend, or whatever, right? So like things are going to change. Can we put the key run that's usually on Saturday? Can we do that on Monday? Does that work? Is it better to do it on Friday? And she's deferential to me in that. Like, I'll take your lead on it, whichever day you think it's better. I'll rearrange and I'll do it that way. So maybe that's number one, is she communicates. Number one is we figured out that she runs Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Saturday, Sunday. Mondays and Fridays are off or easy aerobic development otherwise, right? I've encouraged her, get on your bike trainer. I don't write those, like, she's only for me for running. So like, I don't write the biking in, but I encourage her, get on your bike and spin easy. It's only going to help you. So that's on her to do. So, number one is we came up with our consistent routine. She has her life figured out. So those runs are
Mm-hmm.
going to fit, right? Like they're
Yeah.
like appointments in her life. It's not like, well, if it works out,
Yeah.
I'll go running. No, it's like, no, it's going to work out because she thinks ahead and plans her life
Plans it.
around that running, which is
Yep.
like, if you have big goals, I'm sorry, but that's important, right? Like training, it becomes an important part of your life. If you just want to complete a marathon, this conversation is not for you, right? This is like, I have my goal of how I want to run it. And then, so that's number one. Number two is when something gets in the way of that routine, she communicates it ahead of time so I can plan ahead of time and rearrange things. She typically does two like workouts per week, and the rest are easy running. She's so good at running easy, and she never ever bitches about it being too slow. And so just so you know, like what kind of paces like we're talking about, she's going to try to run like 7:10, 7:15 pace in this marathon. And none of her easy runs are faster than 9:30. Like if she ran 9:30, that was a pretty fast, easy run. At times they're over 10-minute pace. And it never, ever happens where she's like, I'm so slow. I'm like, run this very easy. She goes out and runs it very easy and like check, like deposit made. And she doesn't judge herself for being slow, or anything like that. You wanted to add to that?
Well, no, I was just going to say, I think the best runners, right, or triathletes or athletes, right, they know how to go easy and they're not going to judge it and they let it go. So often the folks that are struggling the most with running and hating it and, I'm not good at it and I suck at it, whatever, right? Whatever the internal story is, I mean, absolutely, like, cannot go easy and hide to the pace. And, yeah, and let's just say their ranges very narrow. So easy run might be 10 minutes. Fast run might be 9:55. Like, I mean, that's maybe an extreme example, but like, I mean, I'm not really lying. Like a minute on either side is very challenging, right? So for too long, I mean, maybe they could do some strides, but yeah. So continue. Yeah, I like the Tia story.
I've totally seen that too, where like my easy pace is 9:15, 9:20. And then when I go to run hard, but like when the athlete goes to run hard, they're running like 8:40. And you're like,
Yeah,
that's
and you're
not
like,
a big enough
that's
difference.
not.
Like if
Yeah,
your strong pace is 8:40, your easy pace should be 10:40, right? Like just
yeah,
should be. Anyway, so yeah, Tia's got a solidly 3 minutes per mile
yeah,
difference in pace
yeah. I like
from
that.
fast to
Yeah,
easy, and she never bitches about like how, maybe it's at least 2 minutes. We'll put it that 2 minutes per mile, and she's super consistent. Like she doesn't miss a run. So then Wednesdays and Saturdays usually were like our key days of when we're going faster. And I will say, and so Wednesdays would be like, we started off with fast intervals, right? That she doesn't need a lot of speed. Like she's one that I would talk about where like if Tia wants to run fast, she can run fast, but she's not holding it for a seriously long time. So like, and this is really common with athletes who are good at going fast, is that they like going fast because it feels good. And so like they want to do, those are their favorite workout. Like I love going fast because like it feels good and I'm capable of doing it. And when you see somebody doing their strides at 5:45 pace, like again, you just know that like speed isn't the thing that's holding you back. Like it's always going to be intervals. So like while and she and I don't think she'll mind you saying this, like she and I went back and forth for a while where she was like, I need to increase my speed. And I was like, no, you don't. You need to increase your ability to hold a moderately strong effort for longer, right? Like she doesn't have a problem going long and easy. Like she could go out and run 30 miles at 9:30 or 10-minute pace, and I guarantee she would just not have a problem with it. Like it's so easy. It's easy muscularly. Like so low end endurance is not her problem. Top end speed is not her problem. But like holding marathon to half marathon pace for more than
Hmm.
more than an hour, right? Which is what you have to do. Like there's where the challenge is. So as a coach, then my job was to like design scenarios where we could mimic that sort of best we could. So there was a lot of regression runs in there. Her Wednesday runs got up to sort of, like 2 times 2 miles at pace on like a mile easy, so 2 miles at pace, mile easy, 2 miles at pace, mile easy, call it good. Next time, 3 miles at pace, and then easy, and then 3 miles at pace. And if we did the first set of 3 miles 10 or 15 seconds slower than the second set of 3 miles, excellent. Tia has access to a lot of long flat roads, which allows her
It's
to
huge. Yeah.
run pace. And so while I'm not normally, this is what I'd say for some of my athletes might be listening to me and being like, she never prescribes run paces for me, like on my intervals like that. And I was like, yeah, it's because you're a triathlete. You live in a hillier place. You
Yeah.
don't,
It's, yeah.
you didn't come to me with a marathon goal saying like, this
Yeah.
is the exact time I want to run for a marathon.
Yeah.
Right. So like we're developing different parts of your fitness. It's not that I don't believe in running by pace or that I don't know how to do it. It's that your particular situation doesn't call for it. But when your goal is to run a specific marathon, then it's like, all right, well then you need to have specific terrain that you can run on where you can actually do it, by pace. So what I'm doing is, so her easy runs started off like by heart rate, and then with her, I was able to let go of the heart rate thing because it just like wasn't an issue for her. Like if I told her to run easy, she just ran easy. Heart rate was low enough. There was never a problem there. For some athletes who buck up against and like don't
Yep.
want to run easy, they're the
Yeah.
ones that I just continually put cap your
Yeah.
heart rate here. Because I know if
Yeah.
I don't say cap your heart rate, they'll
Yeah.
just let it
It's,
drift off and end up running faster. She
yeah.
doesn't do that. And if her heart rate's low the
Yeah.
whole time, it's fine. So like for her, I can say run easy and she runs easy.
Yeah.
So like,
Yeah.
so I don't, anyway, so
Yeah.
for her, I let go of heart rate. And then, yeah, all of her key runs then are by pace. I gave her some way that we did for the most part, it's very little, for the most part, her long run got up to 22 miles, which I gave her like a 22-mile run. And for the most part, every other weekend was like a long run that was mostly all easy. Sometimes I would say, run the first 18 miles just easy aerobic, fuel yourself really well. And then the last 2 miles, just let it rip and not race yourself, but like let yourself run, like see what's in there. Right. And when she did that, you see like, oh, there was still a lot left, which was telling me as a coach that the energy her body was using for the first 18 miles of that run was, I mean, it
It's
was
nice
highly
thing.
sustainable, right? Because like when you went to pick it up, you were
You could
totally
go.
capable of
Yeah.
going 2 minutes per mile faster. And when that's the case, you've got your easy dialed in. And then I would give her some pretty meaty Saturday longer runs. And like those would get up to like 12 to 14 miles. And again, this is like specifically for her. She's a good runner. She's an efficient runner. She's an effective runner. She's really strong. And she's excellent at listening to her body. And so one thing that I would say as a coach, I learned from like watching her build is it there were times where she's got big goals, like big meaty goals, the kind that like you have to go see God sometimes in training to see where your limits are. Like you have to go find your limits infrequently, but like once or twice in the training build. Like if we didn't do those key runs in the training build, we wouldn't really know where her limit was. So I would say at least twice I gave her a workout that I was like, that's meaty. You know what I mean? Like you need to mentally prepare for that. You need to fuel yourself for that. You need to go to bed early the night before. You need to get up and do your mobility first. You need to, you know what I mean? Like this is meaty. And she's smart enough that she could look at that and be like, fuck, that's meaty. Okay. You know, and like mentally prepare 3 days ahead of time. And what was interesting is that both times we did that in this build, she nailed the run. Both times she came back and was like, oh my God, that was hard. And then both times afterward, we paid a price. And I say we because like I am on her team. So like when she's
Mm-hmm.
paying a price, like I'm like, yep, like we definitely pushed it a little, like a little too far maybe, but also like I feel justified in doing that because of her goals and where she's at. And because she's so smart, I feel like I can trust her that when
Mm-hmm.
she's like, hey, I have a little niggle right now, my calf doesn't feel totally right. And then I'm like, okay, no problem. We just scrap that Wednesday
Yep.
key run,
Easy
right? Like
spin.
it's if we
Yep.
did that
Yeah.
on Saturday and on Monday, she's still feeling like, I don't know. She contacts me, she tells me about it. She doesn't tape herself up and pretend it didn't happen and then try to run through it on Wednesday. She's like, I don't feel right about doing this. She's really good at listening to that, which is what allows me to feel comfortable
Yeah.
helping her
Prescribing.
find her
Yeah.
edge because like when she's at the edge, she tells me, okay, no problem. And I'll just take the Wednesday workout and move it back to the next week. Just like run easy or take off or whatever. I mean, but we've seen like her immune system will go down or she'll get a little niggle when we've like pushed that line. And you're like, because she's so smart about it, she's never had to take more than like maybe 3 days of not running before she's like got it sorted and now we're back on track and on
Mm-hmm.
schedule. And so I guess like the key point of all of that is if you're an athlete that wants to run a marathon like Tia's going to run this weekend, like Tia's going to run a good marathon this weekend. She's got an incredible mental attitude. Her fitness is right there. She knows how to fuel herself. She's not afraid of carbohydrates. Like she's not afraid of hurting. She understands pace. She's got that dialed in. Like there's nothing holding her back. Like she's going to have a good marathon this weekend. If you want to have a good marathon like what Tia is going to run, then emulating Tia's process.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right,
Maybe
like part
not.
of my motto is like it's
Yeah.
not luck, like
Yeah.
to come up with a workable weekly
Yes.
schedule that like you can do all the time to let yourself run. I mean the big picture pieces are come up with a workable schedule, communicate regularly with your coach, right, like letting them know when something's off or like when it's good, embrace carbohydrates as something that helps you, right? Let yourself run easy on the easy days so that you can run hard on the key days and you can nail those and then you're recovering from those. Yeah. And I mean that's it really. And it's like I have a hard time. It's a joy for me as a coach to get to do what I get to do with Tia because she's so consistent and every time I see the file coming through. And by the way, there's times where it's like she nailed it and the file looks perfect to me and she's like, "Oh my God, that was hard." And I'm like, "Okay, thank you for letting me know." You know, like
Right.
she doesn't
Right.
pretend that it wasn't hard when it was hard. But then she'll also be like, "And I didn't take care of myself last night like I could have. We went out, we did this thing." So like I do believe that on a different day, had I managed myself differently, it would have been easier. And so like on race day, that's going to be fine. But like, you know, she's able to piece together and see how her like lifestyle, so she still lives a life, right? Like
Yeah.
still sometimes she goes out on
Yes.
Saturday night. And when she does, then on Sunday or Saturday, you know, she's like, that run was a lot harder. And so I'll go out of my way now to take care of myself so that I don't like end up in a deep hole. So yeah, it's just been really fun to coach her. So yeah, Tia, if you're listening, great job. I've really enjoyed helping you and you're going to have a great marathon. And if more athletes would be that consistent, I could coach in that consistent way. And I don't feel like I always get to do that, you know, but like
Yeah. Yeah.
if I can't do it, it's because like your lifestyle is too haphazard and you're not as consistent as you like could be. And by the way, that's fine. Like if you're if you just want to run the marathon and complete the marathon and like feel pretty good at the
Fine.
finish and and have fun with it, then you don't need to do what Tia's doing, right? And that's fine. And then you don't need to center your life around training. But if you want to like if you want to find out where your limits are and where your potential is, like
Yeah. And I know Tia decently well. I've never, I worked with her. I've done her strength program. She's been my strength coach a couple of years ago. So I know her decently well. And it's not to say that Tia's whole life is running or triathlon or anything. I mean, she's very busy. But I think the key that Michelle's trying to say is like she plans it, like she makes it a point. So you can have lots of things going on, but you've got to prioritize and plan it to get it done. And maybe that does mean something else goes like, I'm sure Tia has given up, maybe nights out or whatever, right? To do what she needs to do.
and
But
it's
it's that
temporary too, right? Like so she's not doing this 12 months a year.
true.
She's like,
Yep.
here's my marathon build and it goes through February
Right.
9th. Right. So
Right.
like next
So
week her plan is not going to look the same at all. So it does come and go in cycles. And she's
I've,
really good about giving herself
yeah.
off time.
I've often preached. So for a long time, when I was, back in the day, it was like, everyone's got to be balanced. You got to have balance in your life. I've always preached that you really need to be able to kind of shift your priorities. So you're kind of maybe not all in, but you've got to be able to juggle things. And when you're, for example, when I was really in and I was dedicated to having a good race, like I prioritized it. And then when it was off season or when I was not, or I had races that were just not as important, other things were the priority. So being able to kind of juggle and balance, not balance overall, but, have that long view, right? Of like, this is when I'm going to be all in or more in. And then I'm going to take a step back. And we've talked about this before, but as we get older, I think pulling it way back, like maybe some of us used to do, right? Maybe not the best game plan if you're trying to keep healthy and make
Not
progress,
always.
but
Like,
you know,
when you turn 50, don't turn it all the way off. Don't
yeah,
do that.
no,
That's bad.
no, no. It's yeah. Or I would even say 40. I probably should.
Yeah.
I haven't run probably about a month, 2 months, maybe two. It's crazy how fast the time goes. So, anyways, yeah. I hope you have a great race, Tia, if you're listening, and sending you all my best too. So. I'm a little bit living like not vicariously through Tia, but I really am like a huge fan and I want her to reach her goals. I kind of feel like this is just like the old lady speaking, right? Like my time has passed for like a super, like it would take a lot for me to beat my marathon PR, which whatever, it's, you can look it up, 3:24, right? 3:24 at Boston. Decent. I think I had a lot more potential, but I was in that mindset of like, I have time, I have time, I have time. And then all of a sudden I don't have time. Right. And, I'm a little bit sad. And I guess I have a little bit of regrets of not pushing it while I could, because yeah, age is a kind of a bitch. Anyways, I don't know. Yeah. What else, do we have any, we're kind of, we're a little over an hour.
Wrap it up there. Yeah, I
Yeah.
feel like that's probably it for like the key. I mean,
Yeah.
so in a bit, like if we were to like, this is where I'll leave us. If we were going to sum up in a nutshell, like everything that we just talked about and be like, all right, so what do I do? And again, there's still some nuance here, but if you have some running background, basically 2 times a week where you push out of your comfort zone to some degree in a way that is appropriate for your level, right? So that would be like 2 times a week where you're pushing out of your comfort zone. And then otherwise, as much easy volume as you can put in running, biking, swimming, walking, hiking, snowshoeing, skiing, whatever, right? Like in any capacity of movement that develops aerobic system. If you do that for long enough, you'll likely improve your running.
Yeah, I think that's pretty clear. Yeah, I think, don't be afraid to cross train. Like, really, I think the different muscles you use, especially as we get older again, like it's only going to benefit you, and it's less, especially if you have had any lower leg injury, or you're taking time off as you rebuild. Don't get in the mindset that, only thing that matters is miles and pushing the miles and trying to hit some mileage per week. It doesn't matter. If anything, you're hurting yourself. You could be making faster progress. You might make fast progress for a couple of weeks, but then you're going to be hurting yourself down the line. So Yeah, I think don't be afraid to cross train. And if you are a multi-sport athlete, triathlete, don't think you need to do a traditional marathon build to run a really good marathon. I mean, yeah, again, my
No.
best marathon was off of huge bike volume and very limited long runs, some targeted intensity to get pace work. And I drove down the mountain to go get the pace work in. I think your comment there, Michelle, about like, you know, if you've got like specific time goals, you've got to get pace work in, and that might not work with where you live. So you got to figure it out. Like and I'm not a huge fan of treadmill. I mean, we could talk, that's an episode for another time, but getting to terrain that works for you to do, targeted pace work. It's huge, huge. So
Well, yeah,
yeah,
yeah, depending again, like on what your goals are. But
yeah,
anyway, yeah, let's wrap it up there,
yep,
and we'll call it good. And next time we'll come back, and we'll take these concepts and apply them to like running off the bike, and be like, what
yeah,
changes,
yeah,
right? I think that's a
yeah.
really interesting one, maybe for some people.
Yeah, there's a lot of benefit. Well, a lot of progress could be made running off the bike by doing things that are not related to running. So we'll tackle that next time. Okay, thanks, Michelle. And thanks everyone for listening. Please reach out if you've got any questions for us.
Sounds good.